Good afternoon, folks. We're good to go. All right, I want to begin by congratulating Grand Chief Kyra Wilson on her election as leader of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. She received a strong mandate today, so on behalf of the province of Manitoba, I want to congratulate her. This is good news for all Manitobans because we're going to be able to work together to advance living conditions and economic opportunity for First Nations people in Manitoba. And of course, when that happens, that benefits all of us as Manitobans. On a related note, we are going to be inviting Indigenous leaders to a couple of fora. So we're going to have a couple of sessions to discuss the situation with U.S. trade. We've reached out and are looking at specific dates. We're hoping to have both of these take place before the end of February, and we'll be taking a distinctions-based approach, which means, of course, we'll be having a session with First Nations leaders and then a session also with the Métis government here in Manitoba to discuss the economic interests, the various dynamics with respect to the border with the United States of America, and, of course, to hear the valuable input and advice from Indigenous leaders. So thanks for coming today to hear a few words from our team. There's been a lot of comment today regarding the potential for tariffs coming from the U.S. Of course, this comes from confirmation hearings, but also in the rate cut announcement from the Bank of Canada. By now, I think most Manitobans have keyed in that this is a real challenge that we're going to be navigating for the next little while. And as the leader of the provincial government, I want to provide reassurance. I want to provide reassurance that we are protecting your jobs and we're standing up for the Manitoba economy. To date, we've been very, very active on this file. Going back to the election, we've been laying the groundwork to enhance and improve relationships with the United States of America. That saw us visiting the States a few times last year and laying the groundwork. Earlier this year, we've picked that up with several engagements at the bilateral level, both at the state level with some of our counterparts in Midwestern states in particular, but also at the federal level with the United States of America, engaging with people in the new administration, as well as people in the Senate, the Congress. We'll be heading down February 12th with a group of premiers to meet with people in the administration and in the U.S. federal government. Of course, we've also committed to building a new trade office in Washington, D.C., and we've been engaging here in Manitoba to take the pulse of business, to ask the advice of workers, and to consult broadly with people across our province to figure out how it is that we can stand up and protect your jobs. And so this led to us formalizing those consultations with a U.S. Trade Advisory Council that we announced within the past week. And we'll be pulling that group together again before the weekend. So we've been meeting with business, we've been meeting with labor, we've been meeting with folks in the community. We also know that the border is a major priority. And so we were along our southern border earlier this week to announce our enhanced presence along the border with the United States of America with an eye towards security, but also in keeping with Manitoba's values to have a humanitarian presence there as well. And so I thank the conservation officers who are being asked to do more and who are helping us to ensure that we have security, but also a understanding of compassionate need to respond to people in vulnerable situations. And as the United States looks to these Canadian investments along our border, the things that we're doing as a province aligns with the $1.3 billion that the federal government is spending with Black Hawk helicopters and enhanced investments in the CBSA. So this week we have been engaging as the Council of the Federation. That means the other premiers and I had a meeting yesterday. Again, today we had a meeting with the federal government. The Prime Minister and federal ministers were there, as well as the ambassador to the United States, and the premiers were well represented. We discussed how the Canadian response is evolving to a potential tariff threat, shared ideas around supports, as well as coordinated, some of the efforts that we've been talking about, whether that's to do with the border, law enforcement, and some of these other priority projects as well. So in total, we're spending a lot of effort because this is such an important priority. to preserve your ability to put food on the table, to ensure that Manitoba businesses have the ability to keep powering our economy, and to ensure that the average working person has somebody standing up for them. So these are many, many actions that we've taken already, and as we prepare, of course, for the next few days, but realistically for managing this situation over the coming months and years, we are ensuring that we have every tool in the toolbox available to support you as Manitobans. So with that, I'll say miigwech, merci, thank you, and happy to take questions from the room before we go to Zoom.
I've been asked this a couple of times, but yeah, I know you don't want to play your cards, but we're getting near the deadline now. Is the Manitoba government, like BC, considering instituting a ban on U.S. alcohol products in our government liquor stores and through the government system, and or tariffs on American goods generally?
Well, I think at this point, the first thing, and you're going to hear me repeat this time and time again, so I'm giving you a fair warning for how part of the Scrum questions are going to go. Right now, the real focus is on trying to prevent tariffs from being applied in the first place. So the federal government is putting a lot of emphasis, their outreach. You see the Foreign Affairs Minister, Jolie, and others at the federal level leaning into this. For us, we're there at the border. We're making investments into supporting the economy. We're trying to just send a message to the U.S. that tariffs aren't needed. We have a secure border. We have a great trade relationship, and this benefits jobs on both sides of that 49th parallel. But crucially, here in Manitoba. Of course, we're looking at contingency plans. In the first instance, we're looking at ways that we can protect industry here in Manitoba, and that means potentially looking at supports for business and workers. We're also looking at those sort of contingency plans if this does become a longer-term situation, as I think some of the observers are now saying it might be. You know, what are those subsequent steps? What are those next steps to keep the economy moving here in Manitoba?
What would those steps be?
Well, I think there's a lot of options on the table, and I think one of the reasons why we've pulled together a table, this U.S. Trade Advisory Council, is to give us a sense of where the uncertainty is causing an impact for business, where that risk is weighing on them in particular. So one specific example that I can point to that we're looking at in terms of business supports is the potential for tax deferrals. And so let's say, you know, again, I don't want to give up the ghost here and say that tariffs are a foregone conclusion. We're absolutely still fighting the good fight, that we're trying to prevent tariffs from being applied. But let's say we go forward into the future and there is a scenario where we have to step up to support your jobs and to support your local businesses, small businesses. Tax deferrals are one option that we have. And the thinking there is, well, if there's a cash crunch, there's a liquidity concern for business, if we can help to just allow people to have a bit of a bridge to more economic stability in the future by delaying the collection of, say, retail sales tax or potentially corporate taxes, then that's one concrete way that we could help. But again, at this point, this is a contingency plan that we're developing. The first and most important focus is to try and prevent tariffs from being applied in the first instance. And yeah, hopefully it's a message of reassurance that while we put this effort into leaning into preventing tariffs, we are doing the responsible thing and putting together a plan in case we do need to step up and offer supports in response to a future, I guess, trade scenario.
So just so I'm clear, there's no plan right now for a booze ban from the U.S., correct?
Well, I think at this point, one of the things I've been hearing a lot about, including on the call with the First Ministers, is folks don't want to escalate. And so while we still have the ability to try and head off tariffs from being applied, maybe through proactive measures like, you know, enforcement of the border and sending those visible signs that, you know, we're out there with the conservation officers, we're out there with motor carrier. Let's put the emphasis there right now. Later, if there's a need to take response in like a direct fashion, I mean, that'll be something that we talk about at the appropriate time. But right now the focus is on let's prevent tariffs from being instituted in the first place. But again, everyone is saying these tariffs are a real threat that we need to prepare for. So we are preparing real business supports that we may have to activate. And, you know, the tax deferrals is one. The tax deferrals are one example that I can point to.
You said you don't want, or I guess people around the table don't want an escalation. Would a dollar for dollar retaliatory tariff war, would that escalate things in your
Well, I don't want to get too much into the hypothetical scenarios because, again, we still have this window of opportunity where there are no tariffs in place. And so I think part of saying we're not interested in escalating before we actually see this threat materialize in front of us, part of it is let's just keep the focus on making the case. You know, there's a ton of manufactured goods, there's a ton of ag goods, there's a ton of energy that goes south from Manitoba to the U.S. That benefits the American economy. But there's a lot of cross-border shoppers who go south as well, too. And that powers, you know, the economy of places like Grand Forks and Fargo and contributes to the Twin Cities. So there's a real win-win scenario here. And, you know, we just want to be able to ensure that your jobs are supported and that, you know, if you want to go down on a shopping trip or to go see a concert later this year in the States, that you feel like you're spending money in a jurisdiction that's a good ally and a good trading partner.
There's federal efforts to lobby Donald Trump with a video. That combined with, you know, the border package from premiers like yourself and the country as a total, are those two things together, is that enough?
Well, I think we're definitely a constructive partner in this, and that is what I shared with the federal government today. Manitoba is a constructive partner in their efforts with the U.S. trade relationship. And so we do have those conservation officer investments. We have the additional RCMP resources, the motor carrier enforcement efforts along our southern border to really complement what the federal government is doing and to send that message that border security is a priority for Canadians, but it's also a priority for Manitobans. And that's where I think our local values of who we are as a province is really important. Absolutely, we want border security, but we've also heard these tragic stories of people losing their lives or losing their limbs along the border during winter months. And so we want to have a humanitarian response that's in keeping with our values too. And of course, I think everybody sees what's happening at the federal level in Canada right now. And so not only are we a constructive partner in supporting the border efforts, but I think we as a collective group of premiers are also helping to, you know, provide that reassurance to Canadians from all walks of life that we're out there making the case for our country and for your jobs.
Premier, was there anything new that came up at the meeting today or any consensus among your peers?
Well, I think there's a consensus first and foremost that we don't want to see tariffs and that we want to have a really strong effort, particularly between now and February 1st, even though that's just a couple days away, to prevent tariffs from being applied. And so now that you've seen our province and other provinces devote provincial resources towards securing the border, you've seen, you know, the Black Hawk helicopters very visible and very present. You've seen these images being shared with the U.S. I think there's a ton of effort that's happening both publicly and behind the scenes to try and prevent tariffs from being applied. In terms of new information, you know, it's a bit of a fine line because I don't want to obviously, you know, share everything that we talk about because some of those things are still in development. But I think at the highest level, Canada's response plan is evolving with respect to the potential response to tariffs. And I think it's important that continue to evolve to meet the needs of the moment. And so whereas there might have been talk about a certain level of response, I think it's probably intensifying now given all the additional commentary that we're hearing.
Back to the dollar for dollar discussion. I know Premier Moe has been quite outspoken about his concerns regarding the fallout of such a measure. What is your take on that? Do you agree with Mr. Moe?
Well, you know, I got a lot of respect for Scott. He is the Dean of the Premiers. He's the longest serving member of the COF table. And his contributions are very valued insofar as he provides that background and institutional memory a lot of the times. For right now, like, I don't want to get into the hypotheticals of like this scenario, that scenario, and, you know, what is each potential decision tree, you know, eventuality going to look like there. But what I would say is that if tariffs get applied, Canada's response has to be noticed. We can't be a punching bag. And we have to get our elbows up and let other folks know that we're in the ring there too. But again, as Canadians, like, our response is always going to be like, friendly Manitoba, sorry, let's try and get things on a good footing here. But of course, just as you see at a hockey game, if you push too hard, then we have to stick up for ourselves. And as a result, I think I support a response at the federal level. Here at the provincial level, the primary focus is on how do we support jobs, how do we keep business moving, regardless of what happens, with the understanding the first and foremost priority is to try and head off tariffs from being applied in the first place.
So Ontario has come out with their Ontario Made campaign. Is that something similar that you've been eyeing?
Are you asking if I'm going to drop the writ?
No, in terms of trying to support local businesses, encourage buying of local products. Is that something
Yeah.
like a Manitoba, made in Manitoba sort of plan? Is that on your desk?
Oh, definitely. Like, I think right now, I just encourage Manitobans to shop local and buy Manitoban and buy Canadian all the time, right? We have so many great local breweries and makers and, craft spaces and manufacturers. I think it's always a good idea for us to shop local. In the current environment, I think part of our response will be a more formalized campaign to encourage people to spend their dollars in Canada. We have great places to see 4 seasons of the year here in Manitoba. The Jets are looking like they're going to be playing hockey for several more months, knock on wood. And so I encourage people to come spend money in our province, spend your money here at home. And beyond that, I love these Tourism Manitoba ads that are running in the States. I think efforts like that to send the message of what we bring to the table as a trusted partner for the U.S. while at the same time helping to build that Canadian pride, I think that's an important part of our efforts right now. And so, yeah, I think you will see more of that from both the provincial government, but the folks that we work with as well too as partners. I think we'll be encouraging them to share messages like that too.
The feds are talking about bailouts for workers and businesses impacted, at least that has been reported. Do you like that idea? And if so, what might come to Manitoba?
Well, I think there's a lot of conversations about different tools that the federal government has. Like, they have the monetary policy levers, right? They have this huge additional power of the purse. The federal treasury is much, much more weighty than the provincial treasuries are. And so for them to be able to step up and use those federal tools that can go directly to workers too, I would add, right? Like, those are important policy levers. There's been conversations both at the political level and at the officials level about some of those options. And so we definitely encourage the federal government to use the tools that they have in the toolbox. And then here at the Manitoba level, we're getting ready with those tools that we have to use as well. So talked a bit about one of those options. But I think, first and foremost, the biggest tool that we have right now is the podium to try and persuade Americans not to go ahead with the Trump tariff tax.
Premier, the health minister met with the federal counterpart. Can you share what they discussed?
Well, I think I don't want to scoop them from making any public comments there, so maybe we could follow up on that directly with them.
On another topic, the Winnipeg School Division fundraising. Do you approve of the Winnipeg School Division's new policy preventing parents from fundraising for shortfalls and capital projects like playgrounds?
Well, I think our government wants to be a great supporter of our kids' educations and to ensure that the resources are there. If we kind of break the fourth wall and pull back the curtains here, we were supposed to have a great education press conference today. And it just so happens one of the people who was supposed to participate was feeling under the weather. So you're going to have to wait for the news on the new schools for some other day, I guess. But yeah, education's a huge priority. I think all of us as parents, I'm a parent with kids in schools in the division, right? So I want to see education strong there and strong everywhere around the province. And I think it's a balancing act. You got to listen to the parents, right? You got to listen to the school division administrators. And for us, the most important thing is let's make sure there's the funding and the school buildings and the teachers in the classroom, along with the EAs and educators, to make sure that your kid can succeed.
Do you agree with the policy not allowing parents to do it?
Well, I think that we're going to do our part as the provincial government. You know, we're going to make sure that there's the school buildings. We're going to make sure that the educators, the teachers have a contract where they can see a future in this province. We're going to make sure that your kid has the one-on-one time so that they can succeed. We respect the autonomy of school divisions, and of course parents have the most important role when it comes to young people. So we just got to get everybody together on the same page.
Another health question. Directive was issued to a single regional health authority today to reduce...
The Prairie Mountain one?
Yeah,
Okay.
to reduce their reliance on for-profit nurses. The health minister's tied up in Halifax, so I'm going to ask you,
Sure.
Why was that regional health authority singled out? And is it feasible? Are there nurses available in the public system to backfill?
Yeah, I think the first part of the question is relatively straightforward, and it's because Prairie Mountain has seen such extensive use of agency nurses, and it's really become a challenge for them, both in terms of the staffing side of things, but also in terms of the fiscal side, which then impacts their ability to serve patients in other areas. So we want to ensure that the facilities across Prairie Mountain can be staffed to deliver for the patients, whether that's in Brandon, in the Parkland, the Westman, all throughout the entire region. And the best way for us to staff up in the long term is to have people working in the front lines in the public system. When we've seen this exodus of nurses from the public system into the private agencies, it's really contributed to a lack of the ability to do long-term planning, to keep facilities open or to keep the hours that people want, or to just, have the ability to deal with the amount of patients who are showing up in, say, a Brandon emergency room. So we've been working on this for quite some time, and this policy was designed in consultation and in coordination with the health authority and with people on the front lines. And the bottom line is that we need to set a target, otherwise this is never going to happen. So I think there's been many incremental steps towards seeing us reduce the reliance on agency nurses, and now after working to have the health authority be on side and folks who are in the front lines on side, we're setting that specific target to say, okay, we've got everybody on board here, now let's make sure that we meet this goal so that we can get on with further stages of fixing healthcare for the patient and the person in the ER or the person in the care home.
Are there public system nurses available to...
Yeah, it's part of an overall strategy that also saw us put out this, public call to qualify nursing agencies. That's something that we've talked about in public before. This is on top of like a huge increase in the amount of dollars that are being spent in healthcare this year, right? Like it's $1.5 billion more than was spent last year, right? It was $1 billion that was budgeted, and then in year we've updated that there's an additional $500 million, give or take, on top of that, and that's translated to more than 1,000. Net new healthcare workers on the front lines. So what you're seeing with this directive is a specific policy that's setting a goal that we want to reach in terms of reducing people coming from nursing agencies and increasing the number who are working on the front lines. And it's a goal that's being done in concert with staffing, with limiting who can qualify safety-wise as a nursing agency, and then ensuring that we're doing the training and retention efforts as well too.
As it stands right now, is Prairie Mountain relying on private agency nurses more than they should? Because we've long heard that it's the last resort, but you're targeting them specifically. Are they relying more on the agencies than they should?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, and I think Prairie Mountain Health would tell you that they're looking to reduce the amount of agency nurse use in their region. This is something that we're doing together with them.
I guess, are they making a mistake right now?
Well, I think they're responding to the situation that they were forced into by the previous government, which is there were so many challenges around cuts and closures that agencies became a path to keep facilities open. But now that we've started to reinvest in healthcare, reopen emergency rooms, staff up people on the front lines, it's time for us to get away from that practice. The long-term solution is to reduce nursing agency use so that we can invest more in public healthcare. And we could have those same nurses and frontline experts, whether they're healthcare aides, that's outside of the directive of what we're talking about here, but just to give another example, to have them working directly for you, the people of Manitoba.
96% of allied health workers with MAHCP have given their union a strike mandate. In a survey, the large majority said that staffing, workload, and morale has gotten worse over the last year. You've been in power over the last year. How do you respond to the concerns of allied health workers?
Well, I hope we get a deal. And we've been staffing up. I think everybody works in healthcare sees that, and that's the first step to fixing healthcare. So we'll continue to listen to the voices that come from the front lines. Allied health workers are super valuable. I hope they notice that I try to say allied health all the time when we're talking about healthcare staffing. And that's just one small example of the emphasis and the respect that we put into the work that they do.
Premier,
Yeah.
Premier, are you aware of the allegations against SEO Grand Chief and are you aware of them? The legal regarding, one sec, it's for my colleague.
Okay.
It's regarding the accusations that he's accused of defaulting on a mortgage. It's related to a private company. Now I'm wondering if A, you're aware of the pending legal action, as well as if that has any impact on the province's stance with its involvement in the Bay redevelopment.
I've only seen some headlines and media clips, so I don't have any knowledge to justify any sort of public comment. And the Southern Chiefs organization is somebody that's a value partner for us.
On that note as well, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to earlier, you mentioned the meetings that are pending with First Nation leaders as well as the MMF. Is there anything in particular from their economic interests, concerns that they have regarding the looming tariff threat?
Well, I think there's a lot that I would want to hear. And first of all, the advice that they bring is really valuable as leadership. When it comes to Indigenous peoples, there are specific interests around being able to cross the border for cultural or ceremonial reasons, and I know that those will always be protected in our engagements with the United States, but I think it's important to hear out those priorities and potential concerns. And then, of course, economic reconciliation is so big in our province. I think all Manitobans want to see economic reconciliation move forward and build wealth for all of us as a province. And so if there's an opportunity where either the response to what we're seeing talked about with respect to tariffs needs to have an Indigenous lens on it, I'm very open to hearing that. Or if, as we look to build up our Manitoba economy first and foremost, then definitely hearing those priorities from Indigenous leaders about how we can do that in a good way, I think is going to be important time spent. So maybe we'll go to Zoom.
Thank you, Premier. One reporter on the line. One
right.
question, one follow-up. Timur Durrani, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Premier. Thank you so much for taking our questions today. You mentioned that Canadian premiers are mostly working in coordination on these plans to tackle President Trump's threats for tariffs. I imagine that is kind of the point of these meetings. But what about Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who has refused to be part of the so-called Team Canada approach to these tariffs? Can you tell us how, if, or whether that's been discussed at these meetings that you've been having with the premiers?
Well, Danielle Smith is present at all these meetings and is a valued part of the conversations, just as every premier and first minister is.
I wanted to take that pause just to see if you had anything more to say about Danielle Smith. But you mentioned visible security presence at the border. A few days ago, you told Manitobans about the conservation officers that you're redeploying along this province's parts of the 49th parallel. Today, the Globe and Mail is reporting in Ottawa that the federal government is sending packages of video clips to Donald Trump and his administration to showcase new spending on measures at the border. But do you think this kind of security visibility at the border, in the case of Ottawa, the visual proof, in your case, these conservation officers, all these different things that are happening to show this visibility across this country in different ways, do you think this is actually working? Have you found any indication of that so far? We're now days away from February 1, so I was just wondering about that.
Well, I think that, I know for a fact you and your colleagues and everyone in the room here is going to be carefully watching the confirmation hearings and what I'm thinking of how to phrase this so the comment is evergreen. The Commerce Secretary nominee, who by the time you run a story might be the Commerce Secretary confirmed. But anyways, you know who I'm talking about. When we look at that, it does seem that there is an openness to take a look at what Canada is doing along the border. And let's keep in mind, I think back to a question that you posed into a scrum a few days ago, and I would say this: we're having a lot of success at persuading people that we talk to at the state level and at the Senate and congressional level in the U.S. about saying, hey, we don't want to see tariffs. But there's one person in particular whose mind we need to have land in a favorable direction for Canada. And what I've heard over the years is that if you can watch TV with the volume turned off and just have those visuals tell the story, that's a very persuasive argument to make. And so if you see me or Scott Moe standing along a border with conservation officers, and if there's a Black Hawk helicopter landing somewhere near Emerson playing on TV, I think that helps strongly to make the case with the United States of America that we're taking border security seriously, and that no tariffs is a good way to keep moving forward.
Thank you. That concludes Zoom.
Thanks, Zoom. Any other follow-up?
Can the individual who you alluded to be appeased? You supported 2% GDP spending on defense, and now the goalpost shifted, and now it's 5%. So can he be appeased with videos?
The NATO 2% target is a target that Canada has agreed to in the past. Like, this is a commitment we've already made as Canadians. It's not like a debate that we're bringing forward here as saying, like, should we get to 2%? Should we not? Like, no. Canada has a long-standing promise that we've made as a country that we're going to spend 2% of the size of our economy on the people in uniform, the Canadian Armed Forces, our troops. And so what I've been advocating for on this is that we should live up to our commitment as a trusted ally, as a good partner in global security, which benefits us. We all have, passionate feelings about, world affairs and about, conflicts such as we see in Ukraine. And our ability to stand up for our values as a true north, strong and free, does include us having a strong military and living up to our commitments as a defense partner. And so I think that the priority that I put on that is one that's in our best interests. And as we go throughout the steps of navigating this, every step of the way, it's always going to be about our values. Investing in the military because it helps Canadians. Standing up for border security because we favor a secure border, but also because we want a humanitarian response if people are out there on a prairie blizzard at risk. And investing in our local economy here in Manitoba because putting more people to work in our own backyard benefits us. So as we go along, it's always first and foremost about Manitoba's interests, and it just so happens that having a good trading relationship with the U.S. is in our best interest.
Premier, a question about the orthopedic surgeon who's been banned from working at Grace Hospital. I'm wondering, are you concerned that this doctor, who was already suspended once for inappropriate behavior with a client, is now banned from performing surgeries?
I think it is a concern. I defer to the Minister of Health, though, to get a specific comment, though, because I haven't gotten all the details on that.
And do patients, particularly his female patients, though, would you say, do they have a right to know about any future indiscretions involving this professional?
Yes.
Good.
Good. Alors, juste pour dire en français, nous sommes prêts pour appuyer vos emplois et puis notre économie. Nous avons avancé plusieurs politiques sur la frontière avec le rassemblement de la monde d'affaires et puis des représentants des travailleurs et travailleuses dans la province. Puis il y a des autres options. Peut-être une attente pour les compagnies pour payer leurs impôts, c'est une option pour aider, mais il y a des autres choses que nous sommes prêts à faire. Alors, nous sommes toujours là pour vous appuyer et pour appuyer le Manitoba. Thanks. Thanks for coming, everybody.